Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics. In this video we're going to talk about recoil management, recoil diagnostic with the red dot handgun. I teach quite a few red dot specific classes, red dots on handguns. Eventually I'd like to get back to a point where I could just start teaching handgun classes again, because it's just going to be assumed that everybody uses a superior way to shoot, shows up with a red dot. That's in the future. It's definitely coming, especially considering I've been teaching pretty much only red dot classes for the past 4 years because it's the highest in demand class. One of the things that we talk about in red dots, and you guys know I've done videos on this in the past, or I've mentioned it in other videos, is using the red dot to diagnose what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong. That dot behavior can really show us if our fundamentals are working correctly. And because we're going to be target focused with the red dot, we also get to see our hits until we get too far back, or depending on the target lighting conditions, obviously there's exceptions. And we get to compare those 2 points of data to see if we're doing everything right, and deviations on the target based on the target size. Now you guys know I've done videos on targets talking about accuracy being very arbitrary in regards to what target you choose. If I shoot on an FBIQ, I can be a little bit less precise and still be considered accurate to that target standards. But if I'm shooting a B8 and I shoot that same inefficient accuracy, I'm probably going to score like a 12. So depending on what I'm doing, I have to pick a target that's going to kind of measure my accuracy. I use a target that has a 4x6 A zone. You guys have seen it in plenty of videos, cardboard and paper. B zone is 8.5x11 printer paper. A zone is 4x6. I consider that to be a good precision point of aim from an anatomy standpoint, but also from a practical standpoint of being able to hit a small region of the target, but still be able to do it quickly. In red dot classes, when we start talking about shooting faster, not fast necessarily, but shooting faster, because most people can meet or exceed standards they set for themselves, and often those same shooters will shoot slower than they should be shooting. The reason I bring that up, because I'm a self-defense focused instructor, and I think about the litany of evidence, anecdotal as it may be, of people shooting fast in self-defense shootings. And they probably weren't taught to do that. I've been to 2 academies. I know other people who've been to at least 1 academy, 2 academies as far as law enforcement is concerned. Obviously in the military as well. I went through, infantry basic training. We weren't taught to shoot fast, but there's plenty of evidence to people doing it, which tells me that it's a more natural behavior than a trained behavior. Because if you weren't taught to do it and you did it, then that kind of tells me that it's based on your neurology, your sympathetic nervous system reacting to a violent stimulus, and you're like, make the bad man go away. If people are going to do it, we should be teaching them how to do it. If you've been to one of my red dot classes, you've heard my whole spiel about this when we get into cadence or rhythm type shooting. Doesn't mean you need to shoot fast, you just need to shoot faster. And you don't know where your failures are if you aren't failing. So with the red dot, depending on what gun you're shooting, when ammunition's shooting, your slide is cycling somewhere between 50 and 70 milliseconds. Smoking fast, right? A lot of, relatively speaking, things happen between slide going back into battery and you pressing your next shot, some final adjustment, conscious, subconscious. But your sight picture, what you're seeing, how you're able to perceive it, moves as fast as 13 milliseconds. That's probably right now, that's as fast as I've measured people being able to see under ideal conditions. Now the sight picture itself moves at the speed of light, which, if you think about it, 13 milliseconds is agonizingly slower than 300,000 kilometers a second. But that's way too much math for this video. Way too much math for me, if I'm being honest. What I'm looking for is what the dot does in between shots, that behavior, that recoil behavior. Now, some people, their dot leaves their window, it's noticeably gone for a while, and then it returns. That's a recoil management issue. Some people, to their perception, the dot doesn't actually leave the window because it returns so quickly. And again, that 13 millisecond delay, whereas the red dot is moving at the speed of light, you may not actually ever perceive the red dot having left the window. And then other people, depending on the gun, ammunition, a bunch of other factors, the dot doesn't actually leave the window. And of course, dot size and more importantly, the glass, your window size, your objective, your ocular lens size, that matters as well. So some people, they don't perceive the dot leaving the window. Some people, the dot literally doesn't leave the window. Why is that important? Well, that dot's behavior during recoil tells us what we are doing right or wrong when we press that trigger. So if our dot has a slight left or right departure, it's talking about unequal pressure. If our dot bounces high left, high right, we definitely have some unequal pressure in our grip, and that's going to be a problem when it comes to recoil management, and we'll start throwing rounds left and right. Or maybe I'll see my dot prior to ignition do a lower J or a lower like a G shape. That's some pre-ignition behavior that needs to be addressed. So the dot is always giving us information if we're paying attention to it and calling our shots. If you know you threw a round, first question should be, why? Was it just human factors? Because no matter how good we are at something, we can't do it right 100% of the time for perpetuity. We're gonna make mistakes. If you walk a tightrope, no matter how good you are at it, eventually you're going to fall off if that rope is long enough. You know, whatever analogy or allegory you'd like to use. So one of the things I did is I came up with this target. Pretty simple. It took me about 5 minutes on Photoshop, and I could have used MS Word and it would have taken me 3. I got a circle, I got 2 lines. And then this is for 3 to 7 yards. And on the other side, which obviously you'd need a different target because you're gonna put holes in this, but it prints out this way to save paper, not necessarily ink. This is a larger circle for, say, 7 or maybe probably more likely 10 yards and back to 25. You really take it back as far as you want. And what this gives me is a point of aim and some guides to show me what my dot's doing. Is it staying in these lines? And I guarantee you, if your dot stays in these lines on when the gun recoils, you just hit that black circle or possibly above or below it. But you're gonna be in that channel, that recoil management channel. And I use this target in classes because I was tired of drawing it, trying to tell people to draw it. And more importantly, I wanted to give them a visual guide to what they were doing right and what they were doing wrong. Because sometimes when I explain dot behavior, guys can't see it on their target. They're shooting cardboard, or they're shooting some very boring target, or a target that doesn't have the same degree of precision for its point of aim as far as vertically speaking. So they'd pull the trigger, and I know their dot's going high right, but they're not seeing it. It's not their fault, it's just the target doesn't help them. And since we're target focused and we're practicing or we're training, we should have a target that's gonna be as helpful as possible until it's time to take it away and see how well you do on no scoring zone shooting, which I've done videos on that in the past as well if you wanna check them out. So here, if the dot stays in the guides, I'm doing well. And then I get to play with my technique. If I see the dot kind of hitting the edges a little bit, then I could slow it down, play with my grip technique, play with my trigger control technique if that's gonna be a factor as well. Usually for me, pre-ignition behavior is trigger, post-ignition behavior is all about recoil management, although the two things can throw themselves at me at the same time occasionally and result in a far left, far right, low left, low right hit. I'm not perfect on a machine. I shoot a lot. I shoot more than most people, or I should say, I'll say I shoot more than some people. That doesn't mean every single round I fired is helping me get better. Sometimes, just like I'm sure you've done before, I shoot things I'm already good at, or I shoot at a pace I'm already confident with. That's not getting better. It's not even necessarily maintenance. It's just repetition of a skill I've become unconsciously competent at. So if I want to get better, that's not going to help. I've got to push myself to failure, push myself beyond failure to see if there's small changes I can make in my technique to not become a 100% shooter, because that's impossible. To become a high 80, high 90% shooter consistently, especially on demand. So just for demonstration purposes, shooting this target from 3 to 7, what I generally do is I shoot 5-round groups. And the first time I do it, I'll just kind of play with my grip a little bit. Then I'll start playing with my trigger a little bit, and then I'll try to find, and I'm listening to the dot. When the dot shows me good up and down behavior, that's when I'll really get on the gas and see if it falls apart. And if it doesn't fall apart, well, that's a speed and a technique and a grip and a trigger press technique I'll probably rep out. So I may spend, 20, 30 rounds at 3 yards before I even move back. And maybe sometimes I'll spend 50 or 60 rounds there because I'm really looking for maximizing that precision. Even though most people are going to be pretty good at hitting a 4x6 box, if that's what we're talking about, that's my margin of error. Hitting a 4x6 box at 3 yards, how fast can they do it? How consistently they can do it? And eventually, I'll put the draw stroke back in it, because when I start this out, I usually isolate it and just start from a sight picture, best ideal condition. Once I throw a draw stroke in it, that's less predictable energy, the energy from the draw stroke. Then if I throw a reload in there, obviously I have to rebuild my grip after the reload. So there's other factors that will go into this besides just shooting administratively. And then I can throw a par time, force myself to shoot faster if I just can't bring myself to do it without the shot timer. And that shot timer does add just a little bit of stress. But from 3, 5, and 7, I'm pretty comfortable shooting in the 80 to 90% range. And what I mean is, most of my rounds are going where I want them to go. And when I say most, I mean most, 80 to 90% of them. Human factors, even at those closer distances, are going to be at play. Like I said, that tightrope analogy. I'm going to throw the occasional round, and I want to know why it happened. But it may just be the fact that I'm a human being, and because of the impulse variability and these other factors in my nervous system, my body was on board with everything. Everything was going great. And then, you know, some synapses took a coffee break. And I kind of smoked around a little too far left, a little bit too far right. And I didn't hit my goal. It may not be the catch-all answer that some people like to give of slow down. If a guy is shooting 9 out of 10 rounds consistently in an A zone at a blazing fast speed, the one thing I'm not going to tell him to do is slow down. So comparative, there's my 4x6. And this is one of the targets I shot 3-7. As you can see, I'll center that up perfectly there. Put the black dot right in the center. And yeah, had I been shooting at a 4x6 A zone, regardless of speed, regardless of technique, from 3 back to 7, those all would have been A zone hits. Now this is my A zone. Yours may be bigger. That's fine. When I think about anatomy, that's a pretty precise point of aim, realistically speaking, for a handgun. This is going to give me really good attitude-changing round placement. If it was slightly larger, I would probably still get the same result, medically speaking. But again, target size can be arbitrary. We can argue about that all day long. Some people feel this is too small of a target to go fast. I disagree. Now, when I introduced the larger target, I had to do a larger target because I feel like once I get back to 10 yards, 15 yards and further, I'm a human being. I'm not a vice. I'm not a ransom rest. I'm going to have even those small errors that were occurring at 3, 5, and 7 that still allowed me to get that center hit. I was seeing them in that channel. I was seeing the dot ride the right, ride the left, a little bit left more than right because my grip was having some issues there. But at the end of the day, my group still fit. When I go to the larger target, those errors are still going to be there. Only now, if I was using the smaller target, and I'm saying this because I've tried it, throwing around is pretty easy to do. So I give myself a larger margin of error because think about from 10, 15, 20, even when I'm shooting faster, all those small inefficiencies in my technique are going to exaggerate, which means if I'm trying to hit that smaller circle, I'm not going to get it while being able to maintain a kind of speed. I'm going to have to shoot too slow. I want to be able to shoot quickly. I like to say shoot as fast as possible, which is not the same statement as saying shoot as fast as you can. I can shoot just as fast from 25 as I can from 3, but I'm not going to get the same accuracy. So I have to regulate my speed based on my distance. Targets like this help me do that with the red dot because I get an idea of what's acceptable behavior, what's good technique, grip, trigger press, those things. Same thing, I feel out different grip pressures, different grip techniques, maybe even change my trigger technique up. Once I get back past 10, I'm usually more worried about stability than I'm recoil management. Recoil management is still important, but I'm not delivering as much downward force in my grip once I get back to 15, which is a factor that matters. Shooting this from the 10, I really feel out the placement and kind of experiment my way through it. You guys are seeing me miss. I know that for some of you that's crazy. You're thinking to yourself, well, I've never seen a video where a guy actually filmed him missing. That's weird. I'm showing you the process, but I've got a surprise for you at the end of this. I'm feeling through that technique, getting an idea of what I can get away with. So I might start off at quote-unquote an administrative speed, and we see when I deviate, where I deviate. Playing with grip pressure, stability versus recoil torque. Getting an idea what the gun's going to allow me to do. Of course, the gun is a factor in this as well. You'll notice that I shoot a lot of comped imported guns. It's because I hate recoil. That being said, you can still make mistakes with those guns. If you're putting all your money into gear and none into skill, you're going to be pretty disappointed. I can shoot just as well, a little bit slower with a gun that isn't comp reported, because the reason I use comps reports is because they actually do provide recoil management. And if you're one of those macho people that says, oh, you should be able to handle recoil, I'd like to introduce you to physics. So that's my 10-yard target. Most of my rounds are inside my guiding channels, right there, right? And most of those are hitting my desired point of impact, which is that larger black circle. But there are a troubling number of rounds that failed to meet that standard. But here's what's cool. I did this on the last one. We'll do it on this one. I'll go ahead and perfectly line up kind of my overlay. And then we get an idea of how many rounds actually would have missed that A zone. So by my accuracy standard of the A zone, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, arguably 5 rounds that would have failed to hit that 4x6 box. So no matter what speed I shot from the 10, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not happy with a lot of these rounds, but the goal is a higher degree of precision at a greater degree of speed in a smaller point of aim, greater degree of precision. When I apply it to my normal standard, I'm doing better. So this is almost like in basketball. Some coaches, they like to have people practice on a smaller hoop. This is kind of the idea, that old trope of aim small, miss small, but for me it's aim small, miss small, and do it faster. So everything shipped well, I had good placement, and I was calling those deviations. I was watching that dot favor the left side of the target there, but I was pushing through it to see what would happen if I did versus slowing down, getting off the gas. Sometimes you got to go through the corner sideways, see if you can do it. Pushing it back to 15, this is where recoil, like I said, takes kind of, recoil management, I should say, for me, takes a bit of a second seat to stability. Recoil management is still important. My grip's going to change a little bit. My pressure relationship's going to change. My priority is going to change. And I'm actually going to notice a little bit more exaggeration in the dot behavior depending on the gun I'm shooting, because I'm not putting as much emphasis on that downward pressure to help get that muzzle back as quickly as possible after shots. I just can't shoot as fast from this distance unless I have a larger point of aim. So as I'm banging these out, I'm playing, again, when I say playing, I'm experimenting knowledgeably with my grip pressure to see if I can cause a different type of dot behavior, which will then result in a more consistent round placement at the same speed or faster. I say playing to kind of shrink that down, but I wanted to make sure everybody understood what I'm talking about. I'm not just out here banging rounds out to kind of experiment my way and guess my way through things. I'm making these knowledgeable changes in grip pressure based on where I understand the pressure needs to be to optimize how well the gun can shoot and how quickly it can do it. So stability at these distances becomes a little bit more important than recoil management. Recoil management is still important, so you got to find a way to do a whole bunch of things with two hands, ideally. And of course, two-handed shooting is a luxury. One-handed shooting is kind of a separate, more in-depth topic. From 15, that's plenty big, but it's intimidating because not only does the dot or my reticle completely leave my desired point of impact and my scoring zone when I pull the trigger, sometimes when it comes back, it doesn't center up well in that black circle or in it at all. So then I have to make an elevation or a windage adjustment at my grip and then break off that next shot in sequential shots. The gun doesn't work on autopilot as well. And those same things happen at 3 yards, but I'm at 3 yards. When I move back to 15, even small inefficiencies in my technique will magnify, but I'm still trying to shoot as quickly as I think I can get. I know I can get an acceptable sight picture, and I'm doing it on purpose. The second reason being, what happens if I do deviate at these distances? I'm seeing the dot leave those guides, and then when I look at the target, I'm like, that wasn't that bad. So I'm looking for that 80 to 90% of performance or better. And just like before, when I overlay my 4x6 onto my target, arguably I've got some rounds that did miss. No, actually it's not arguable at all. 1, 2, 3, 4. You could argue about 5 or 6, but that's what I'm looking at. That looks cool. When I take it away, I'm like, oh, that's terrible. And that's kind of how I feel about it. That's terrible shooting. But the standard was met. The standard was consistently keep the rounds channeling inside this diagnostic target and pushing myself to shoot faster than maybe I'm comfortable with. Now, there are problems in here that I'm diagnosing I need to address. There are way too many rounds up top. Up top means I was pressing too soon as the gun was settling back down, because I doubt with any pre-ignition push or more correctly, pre-ignition push probably the best way to say it. I'm pushing the gun down, not up, most likely, just based on ergonomics and behavior and just my experience of seeing a bunch of people do it. Most people have that J in their reticle right before ignition. That's pre-ignition push. This is most likely breaking too soon as the gun cycles down from recoil. It's probably I was a little bit in too much of a hurry. Even though it didn't shoot as fast at 3, it matters more at 15. Why is this target important? Well, if I just shoot on the A zone, I can shoot well. You know, I can shoot at the distance or whatever and, you know, start at 3 and work my way back. I can bang out 5-round groups. And if I'm lucky, depending on distance, berm color, lighting conditions, I can actually see my hits, which gives me an idea of how consistently I'm shooting as I move back from 3 back to 5, 10, 15. In this case, I'll go back to 15. What I don't see in a guide is my dot behavior. I'm watching it bounce up, and maybe I even notice it go a little left or a little right, but especially when I get back to like 10 or 15 yards, I don't know what that dot means until I walk forward and look at the target. And then I got a question, is that bullet connected to that dot behavior that I saw, or is it something different? Because if I can't see my hits, it becomes problematic for diagnostic purposes. I'm sure I got to the point in this video where the people who came to see me shoot the latest and greatest gun or suppressor, or in my opinion an optic, or watch me drop shit, have tuned out. And that's fine, because those of you who are still here, this video is for you, it's not for them. It's for people who actually want to learn and want to get better. This is getting into the minutia of performance when it comes to red dot shooting. And this doesn't just apply to handguns. You can use this target for rifles as well. I use it all the time for rifles. It gives me an idea which muzzle devices do best for me, because it shows which muzzle devices are actually pushing the gun off center based on my grip technique, so on and so forth. Suppressors it's great for. Some suppressors have behaviors that are only really evident on targets like this when it comes to recoil management. I want to shoot better. That's kind of, you know, what we're all here for, right? But this gives me a way to more knowledgeably approach the task in regards to recoil management, in regards to red dot handguns. Will this work on iron sights? Your eyes don't refocus that fast. Plenty of people see their sight picture track on iron sights through recoil, but they're not able to hard focus on it, and it's really not usable data in the same degree of precision that we get from a red dot. Remember, those slides cycle 50 to 70 milliseconds on average. Yeah, that's pretty fast. When you think about a tenth of a second, is also known as 100 milliseconds. Something cycling less than 100 milliseconds is faster than most humans can practically comprehend and put that knowledge to use, so to speak. So you can grab this target off of my website if you want to try it out. It's not a challenge. There's no time limit. It's not a drill. It's a diagnostic tool. And I think if you do it, or the easier way would be like, hey, that's a cool idea. I have a marker. I'll just draw it myself. You can take a ruler out there or just eyeball it, and you're still going to be able to get good information based on the target you use. I like using this target because it's printed out and it's easier for me, and I'm kind of lazy when it comes to drawing, and I suck at art. So drawing a straight line is a huge challenge for me. So you can grab it, and next time you go to the range, dedicate, 10 or 15 rounds to one distance, or dedicate 10, or if you can afford it, 10 or 15 rounds to each distance you want to shoot, and see how well your management technique is working as far as recoil management, see what kind of dot departure you're seeing. And then you can use that information to correspond to immediate corrections in your technique. And if you find a way to grip that gun during shots that keeps that dot going straight up and down, that's your new grip. I'm Eric Count with Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.